Hello, listeners, and welcome to another episode of Subscription Scaled. I'm your host, Nick Frederick. With me today is Ilyse Kaplan. She is the president and COO of Feather. Ilyse, welcome to the show.
Hey Nick, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be
Awesome.
here.
Well, great. I can't wait to get in here. So let's start with what is Feather? Let's start with an overview of the business.
Yeah, absolutely. So Feather is really redefining furniture rental for a new generation of renters, people that are moving more often, people that change jobs, change roommates, change their cities, change their homes, and being able to change their design, change the furniture that they're living with,
Mm.
gives them a lot of freedom and flexibility, really in every sense of the word.
Wow. Well, there's a lot of that happening today, right? People moving all over the place. We were just talking about that before we jumped on today, and everybody loving to change things out, not only move, but just being able to have that flexibility. Is that who you're addressing? Is that your target consumer today?
Yep, definitely. Our target consumer is, call it 25 to 40-year-olds living in big cities, and those folks have always moved pretty frequently, whether it's moving to another coast for a job or moving in or out with roommates. But I think actually since COVID, they're much more cognizant of the fact that things can be more temporary. And that really has helped shift that mentality even more to understanding that renting your furniture can make a whole lot of sense.
Awesome. Well, can't wait to dive into more into that. But before we do, tell us a little bit more about yourself, your background, and how you found yourself at Feather.
Yeah, sure. So I guess I'll start at the beginning.
Okay.
I grew up in the Detroit area. I'm the daughter of an artist and a small business owner. My dad actually ran a hardware store, and to this day, the smell of fresh cut sawdust just makes me smile.
I love it too. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. And so our home was really the center of so many things, from family dinners to a shared space to work and play. My mother's art studio was in our home. And so I've always had a really strong appreciation of how much a beautiful and a functional home can really be that foundation. And professionally, I spent most of my career as an investor. Over time, I got the itch to really be on the other side of the table, not just to be investing in businesses and working with them from that perspective, but I started consulting. I had my own consulting practice, and that made me even more eager to
Mm.
really get in the trenches. And when the opportunity came up to join Feather, which was about 3 years ago, it was really just a perfect opportunity for me personally. I came in initially, there were only about 10 of us. I started by running the finance department, and then
Okay.
I've grown my scope sort of bit by bit over the last 3 years. And now I really manage all aspects of the organization. So that's growth, technology, and operations.
Awesome. So how old is Feather then?
Feather is just over 4 years old. We actually just celebrated our anniversary. We were in the
Okay.
spring Y Combinator 2017 class.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. A lot of growth. So which markets are you guys in today?
So we're primarily on the consumer side of the house, which is the bulk of our business. We service
Okay.
New York, San Francisco, and Los Angeles, which also includes Orange County. And
Okay.
then just in this last year, we also expanded into Washington, D.C., Baltimore, and Texas. Texas includes Dallas, Austin, Houston, Fort Worth, and San Antonio.
Okay. That covers a whole lot of ground in a state the size of Texas.
Yeah, it definitely does, but there's more expansion to come. We're drawn to the markets where our customers are, and those are markets that they've been asking us to come to for quite a while.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, tell us how the product works. How do consumers sign up for it, get their delivery, and then talk a little bit about the life cycle there.
Yeah, absolutely. So it really is a DTC company. You just go online. You are able to choose from over 200 different pieces of furniture. Choose what makes the most sense for you and your space. So that's everything from dining room, living room, bedroom, you name it. We also have rugs and art.
Okay.
You choose what pieces you want, choose the amount of time that you want to rent them for. We currently offer three different plans: 1 month, 3 month, and 12 month. 12 month being the most popular. And then we deliver and assemble everything white glove in your home. And so it really takes all of the stress out of the typical furniture selection process.
Yeah. So in that sense, being subscription, can consumers purchase anything from the beginning or maybe at the end? Is that an option as well?
Yeah, so if you decide you love the furniture, everything that you've paid towards that individual piece goes towards buying it. So
Okay.
again, back to what I was saying at the top of the podcast, that freedom and flexibility, it's flexibility out of the gate. So you only
Yeah.
pay monthly and you can just have the items for as long as you need them. But if you end up falling in love with a piece of furniture, then by all means, you're welcome to buy it and keep that as part of your forever furniture.
Gotcha. I assume then there's different pricing associated with how long you're going to keep it and then kind of amortize some of that cost towards the purchase price and that sort of thing.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. The best deal for customers and the one that most customers choose is they really tie it to the time of their lease. So most of our customers are leasing their apartment, renting
okay.
their apartment, and so they rent their
All right.
furniture.
Mm-hmm.
They pay $19 a month. That gets them that free delivery, assembly, and setup in their home. Also pick up at the end of their term if that's something that they want. And then they get really great prices on that furniture. So they have the option to do whatever it is that makes the most sense for them, whether that's keep that, whether it's return it at the end, or whether it's buy those items.
Yeah. You were saying towards the beginning there that most of your customers are consumers. Does that mean you have corporate or commercial accounts as well?
We do, yeah. There's a couple of different verticals that we've served over time. One of them is short-term rentals, so companies that are sort of a mix between a hotel and an Airbnb.
Okay.
And for us, it's a pretty similar setup. They're looking for very similar types of furniture to what we offer for our consumers. We also serve office customers and home staging customers.
Well, yeah, home staging, that's a big business these days, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And so is office. It's interesting. The way people are working is changing so much. And obviously, work from home is a big part of our business.
Yeah, sure.
So many of us, myself included, have really gone from working in an office 5 days a week to working from home more often than not. But for those who are going back to office, the way that they're working within an office is changing. And so they're also looking for more flexibility.
Yeah. Did you guys see a big spike in office furniture a year and a half ago when everything kind of got locked down?
Yes, we did. In the beginning of COVID, when the pandemic really started, we already did have a home office business,
Okay.
but during the pandemic itself, we saw over a 400% increase in demand for those home office items. That's everything
Wow.
from sit stand desks to, premium office chairs, things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Well, so you talked about what they're typically trying to do in furnishing an apartment, associated with their lease and that kind of thing. Is that the bulk of your customers? But because I gotta think you've still even got homeowners and people like that who maybe are just indecisive, right? And going and buying a piece of furniture, a couch these days can be, thousands of dollars. So is it also people who have trouble making commitments?
Yeah, it's not necessarily just people who have trouble making commitments. Maybe it's that they just want more flexibility in what they have,
Hmm.
or they want the
Sure.
option to change it over time. So maybe something makes sense for those first couple of years that you're in a home, but then as your kids are getting older, you want maybe something a little bit different in the living room. So there's different people at different phases of their life that don't necessarily want to commit to furniture as being something they're going to have forever.
Yeah.
Also you mentioned people buying a home. A lot of times when people make that big purchase to purchase a home, that might be bigger than the place that they were living in previously. They might not have enough furniture to fill it on day one and might not want to spend all of that money to furnish it and own all of those items outright on day one. So by
Yeah.
using Feather in an owned home, you can just pay monthly. Really, again, within 2 weeks, have all of the things that you need for your space. And if you end up loving them, keep them. And if not, at the end of your term, put them back to Feather. We'll refurbish them and put that back out on its next life. So you're right. It definitely serves a lot of people at different phases, not just apartment renters.
Yeah. So let's talk for a second about kind of how you're differentiating the business because furniture rental obviously isn't new. The rent centers of the world have been out there for decades and have certainly served what I think is a certain kind of market that's probably not yours. So what was the thought process there on why you thought this model is different and made sense?
Yeah, absolutely. We're a really different business model than some of the more legacy players in the furniture rental space. First of all, our target customer, they're someone who's moving often, and while they could afford to buy, buying just doesn't make sense for their lifestyle. And so, what I mean by that is, if they're moving every 18 months on average, is how often we think our customers move, whether they realize it or not. I think that some people know, okay, I'll be in this space for 1 year or 2 years. Some people think they might be in it for five, but the reality is that young professionals living in New York, San Francisco, Austin, they're moving pretty frequently. And so their default behavior, which might be, well, let me go and purchase a piece of furniture. I can buy something cheap, at the end of its life cycle, I can just throw it away. That's really antithetical to their values. And
Hmm.
unfortunately, fast furniture is the second largest contributor to landfill waste in the US after food.
Oh,
So
wow.
believe it or not, we throw away 10 million tons of furniture every single year. And a lot of that furniture is not biodegradable, right? And so people aren't thinking about that when they make that sort of immediate, easy decision to buy fast furniture, but they
Yeah.
should be.
Yeah.
And they're not
Gosh,
thinking
that what
also
a
about,
staggering fact
yeah,
there. Yeah.
yeah. It's bananas. That mission really is at the core of everything we do. It's our company's mission to change people's relationship with material goods for a healthier and happier planet. And that really is at the core of why we started the business. It's to solve this, at the very least, put a dent in the problem of fast furniture, and to do
Well,
so in a way that's really accessible for our customers.
yeah, well, with something as big as furniture, right? Whether that's a couch or a bed or something like that, when they reach their end of their life or sometimes prematurely, that is a large item going into a landfill. And if you can keep even a percentage of that out and give it another life, refurbish it, that I'm sure that goes a long way.
Yeah, that's exactly right. In the industry, we call it big and bulky. And so
Okay.
those items that are big and bulky, like a sofa, they're really challenging to move. That's also a big part of the problem that a lot of our customers experience. They think, whatever, I'll get rid of it at the end of my time in this apartment.
Hmm.
Finding somebody to buy your used furniture on Craigslist is not always as easy as you might think. Lugging it down the stairs of your apartment building by yourself, also not as easy as you might think.
Right.
And so really just having that full service, right? Everything from the white glove delivery and assembly to the pickup, refurbishment, and putting it out on its next life just aligns a lot better with our customers' values and their needs.
Yeah. So how are you reaching customers who might not even think about or know that there's this sort of alternative option out there?
Yeah, so a lot of it is sort of the usual channels that you would expect. So, digital marketing, whether it's Facebook, Google, not all of those usual suspects.
Okay.
We also are doing out of home. So, in the past, we've had campaigns on the New York City subway. Right now, we're doing Uber
Hmm.
tops. So, driving around town, little mobile billboards. We're also doing partnerships with certain companies. We're doing partnerships with influencers who are really
Okay.
passionate about our brand and speaking to it. And so there's just a whole host of different approaches we're taking. Of course, podcasts as well being one of them. The
Hmm.
number of people that hear about us on podcasts is growing and growing. And so
Yeah.
we're just trying to meet our customer where they are.
Yeah. Partnership's one of my favorite channels just because I think the power of, an existing customer base of somebody who may trust a brand or a partner, then having them say, hey, check out these guys. How do you guys facilitate those relationships?
Yeah, so there's a couple of ways that we do that. The most obvious one that comes to mind is with some of our branded furniture partners. And so
Okay.
we work with a couple of different companies, West Elm, Pottery Barn, Lisa, and one of my personal favorites is Floyd. And the reason that I say they're a personal favorite, not because they're not all great brands, but as a Detroit native, it just makes me really happy to be partnering with a Detroit based furniture startup. And so we offer those branded products alongside our feather products. And so that's a great way for us to tap into a company like Floyd's existing customer base. People that might not be ready to purchase that furniture, it might not make sense for them now, but they
Hmm.
really want access to those products. And so we offer them a way to get access to those great products.
Wow. So are for some of the bigger national brands, West Elm and those like that, are they pushing Feather as a way to alternatively purchase their products, or they haven't gone quite that far yet?
So it depends on the brand.
Okay.
I think that West Elm sees us as a partner in a lot of ways, and it's a great way for someone to really dip their toe in the water with West Elm, get a couple of pieces, and if they love
Hmm.
it, maybe go to West Elm to ultimately purchase more product. I think that same customer might also get a mixed basket of West Elm and feather products and ultimately
Sure.
end up purchasing some feather products or just deciding that rental is right for them for the long term. So
Hmm.
there's just a myriad of ways where both parties are really benefiting from that relationship.
Yeah. So let's talk then about you've got a lead now that we're on the customer acquisition side of things. So what are the various payment methods that customers can sign up with? Do you guys offer credit? Like what have you guys explored there?
Yeah, absolutely. So our customers who sign up on our website are able to select their furniture and check out all by themselves on the site itself just by entering in their credit card. And so that
Okay.
first payment actually gets charged ahead of the delivery. And
Hmm.
as you can imagine, it's something that given that we are sending an entire basket of furniture to their home, having that first payment made ahead of time is a really important one for us.
Hmm.
We also do run credit checks on our customers because we are, in a way, extending them a form of credit. We're taking monthly payments over that typically 12-month term of their lease.
Yep.
And every month we just have a recurring charge that we set up with them and their credit card and charge
Hmm.
them monthly for those items.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm sure that first payment nowhere near covers the total value of what you're putting in someone's home. So, is that how do you deal with the friction associated with, credit checks and a lengthier checkout process because of that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I have a lot to say about that. I'm not sure if it's going to be the most interesting thing to your podcast listeners, but it's something that I was personally involved with in setting up at Feather. And so we've really designed it to be as frictionless of a process as possible. In most cases, we're able to just very quickly check somebody's credit by getting their first name, last name, and the address to which they're having the furniture delivered. And so,
Okay.
given that we need that information anyway in order to deliver the furniture, that makes it pretty seamless. They just click the button on the website and we do a credit check with Experian just to
Okay.
validate that they meet our criteria. There are instances in which we have to have a little bit more of a manual process. So, for example, somebody who is working for the UN and only recently moved here might not have as easy of an ability
History.
to look up their credit history within
Right.
a sort of traditional database. But the
Hmm.
vast majority of our customers, it's a pretty simple and seamless process. And, it's important for us. Again, they have a physical asset of ours and a big and bulky one at that.
Hmm.
And so it's not like we can just turn off access to a digital subscription. We really want to make sure that when we enter into this relationship with them, it's a good one on both sides and that they're going to be able to pay for their subscription.
Yeah, just off the top of my head, I can think of a couple of challenges that would come to mind for you that aren't typical of some of the other guests that we've had on the show, or or the average subscription business who's a digital product that might be $10 a month or something like that. You're right. You can just kind of flip the switch, turn them off if they want to come back, or access the content. They can turn it back on. You're in a very different situation. So, talk about some of the bigger challenges and maybe even some lessons learned in terms of like keeping those customers, making sure that you're getting those payments and keeping them for the long haul.
Yeah, I mean, fortunately for us, it hasn't really been that big of an issue. And I will say,
Okay.
because we have a physical product that's in the customer's home, while there's definitely, challenges that come from that, there's also major benefits that come from that. We have an emotional relationship with the
Mm,
customer that's pretty
right.
hard to replicate because we are, our products are in their bedroom. It's the dining room table at which they're having dinner with their family every single night. And so, having a great quality product in their home that they're using every day. And also, I'll say our phenomenal customer success team. We have just a great level of customer service that we provide on an ongoing basis through the term of that relationship with them. Our goal is for it to be a great experience for them from the moment that they check out to the delivery experience they have when they receive their furniture, and then on an ongoing basis. A thing people often don't think about, but that we offer is really that ongoing help if anything does happen with your furniture. If you were to just buy something and 6 months in it breaks, that's on you, and maybe you'll get some luck with the warranty department somewhere. But with us, we provide that ongoing support during the term of the subscription, and so that's one way that we really keep folks engaged and ensure that they're having a great experience with us. From
Wow.
our side, it's just making sure we get the right customer in the first place, and that
Yeah.
credit check is a huge part of it.
Yeah. Uh, Are 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 you finding that I'm sure as you're expanding, you're going into different markets, you're getting different types of customers. Have you had at this point to tighten the reins in any way, or kind of that credit check that you have in place seems to be working?
Yeah, the credit check that we have in place seems to be working well.
Okay.
We continue to attract a pretty similar demographic of customer, and so that hasn't really been a challenge for us. And you can see the delinquency behavior tied to bracket of credit score pretty clearly. So we've set our levels at a level that
Okay.
we think is really um, good and healthy for us, and also a good and healthy one for the customer. Um, One more data point on credit scores. So we actually look
Yeah.
at Vantage scores, and that's an interesting one because a lot of companies focus on FICO. A lot of
Uh-huh.
our customers don't necessarily have an established FICO score. They might be just a year or two out of college. And Vantage actually measures more things than just do you pay loans, credit card debt, student debt, those types of things. It actually will look into whether you make other subscription type payments. So are you regularly paying your Netflix bill? All
Mm.
of those things and just that good payment activity helps to build out the Vantage score profile. And that's really relevant for our customer in particular, just given where he or she is in their life.
Yeah, absolutely. And good on you for not just relying on the typical way that, we have historically thought about credit, when it comes to buying a car or a house or something like that, but going after something or looking at something that's more relevant to your consumer base. Was that
Yeah.
there from the beginning, or you guys pivoted to that at some point?
On day one, we didn't really have anything in place on that front. And then we learned pretty
Yeah,
quickly the importance of putting in place those guardrails.
yeah, awesome. Well, as you guys are growing, obviously going into a new market is going to be key, right? You have to be able to service whoever you're marketing to. Is that the primary criteria in expansion? Is just looking at what markets are, best fit for your type of product or service, or are there other things that are going into it?
Yeah. We definitely look at like the total addressable market, the serviceable addressable market, really just making sure
Hmm.
that there's enough people in that market to provide a base of demand because our service is quite localized, right? It's not only the
Yeah,
initial delivery of the product, but it's the white glove delivery and assembly, and then picking it up at the end of its term, refurbishing it and putting it back out on its next life. And so we really want to make sure that as we're investing in that market, we see enough demand both for that first deployment, but then also for all of those subsequent deployments. So we definitely do a fair amount of, market research and validation to make sure that there's enough people that meet all of the different demographic, socioeconomic, psychographic, qualifiers that we look for in our customer base.
yeah.
Um, and that's why we've chosen the markets that we have to date. I'll tell you that we're getting requests every day to come to new markets. And so
Hmm.
there's no shortage of additional markets for us to expand into. But
Yeah.
we try to be really thoughtful about which ones make the most sense for our business now and which ones will make more sense later.
Yeah, well, there's certainly the addressable market in terms of customers, that you can get signed up, but there's got to be a lot of logistics involved here too, right? You need warehouses, you need staff, you need places you can refurbish furniture and get, you're probably shifting furniture amongst markets, right? Depending on where the demand is. So geographic location, I assume, and all of these different kind of things come into play as well.
Yeah, definitely. So right now we own the last mile logistics in New York City, Los Angeles, and San Francisco. And
Okay.
in some of our markets, as we've been expanding, we're also partnering with a 3PL partner there.
Okay.
And so they're very tied into our logistics practices and whatnot. That
Hmm.
allows us to scale a little bit more quickly than if we were owning every single piece of that last mile by ourselves. But you're right. There's definitely advantages to being, call it geographically contiguous, one market to the other and being able to redeploy. It's certainly easier to take a product from Los Angeles and find a home for it in San Francisco if we need
Yeah.
to than to put that same product out in Tennessee. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, there's certainly advantages to being geographically clustered.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, if Nashville's not already on your radar, let me plug for it. It's a big growing market, and I realize it's not close to a lot of other markets, but definitely a good one to consider.
Keep that in
What's
mind.
yeah, what's so as you've scaled up this business, right, and gone into different markets, you guys have the customer acquisition side of things and the direct to consumer aspect of your business that I'm sure has driven a lot of technology and operations decisions, as well as then on the logistics side of things. So, in terms of what kind of decisions have you guys made in the past and are looking to make in the future about, where you're putting people? I know you guys are remote right now, but also technology investments that you guys are making. Are you pulling things off the shelf? Do you find that you're having to build a lot of technology to meet your pretty specific need that's not really, there's probably not a whole lot of components out there that'll do you a lot of good. So how are you guys making those kind of decisions?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I'll answer it both as it relates to our technology and then as our physical product to start, because in both cases, there's a lot of things that exist out there that are a great starting point, and then there's an
Mm,
opportunity for us to really take it to the next level for our specific business model. So thinking about our physical product, most furniture is not made to be assembled and disassembled a bunch of times, right?
right.
It's made to be assembled once, sent to your home. It lives out its life for as long as it does. And then when you go to disassemble it, more often than not, you'll find that taking the foot off the sofa strips the threading. Or you'll find that if you happen to spill something on the cushion, that it's attached to the entire sofa. And gosh,
Yeah.
how are you going to get that stain out? And
Hmm.
so we've actually gone to great lengths, both to partner with some fantastic branded partners, like I mentioned earlier, Lisa, Floyd, West Elm, Pottery Barn, but then also really to design and manufacture a lot of our own product that meets our specific needs. So we call it
Hmm.
rental grade. We're building it with component parts, and we're thinking really thoughtfully about how to make sure this is an asset whose life can be extended for a really long time. our anti-goal, as I mentioned earlier, is for things to end up in a landfill. And so we want to do
Hmm.
everything we can to make sure that every individual piece is built really thoughtfully in a way where its life can be extended for as long as possible. And so it's a perfect example of us taking things that are, quote unquote, off the shelf or, existing already in the market with our branded partners, and then really supplementing that with the physical product that we think is the right one for our business model. And it's similar on the technology side. There's certainly things off the shelf that we're able to use, but for our business in particular, we really have built a lot of it from the ground up. It just doesn't exist off the shelf in the ways that we need it to.
Yeah. Were you finding that things weren't functionally able to meet your need, or was it more about a scalability issue for you, support? What were the key factors?
Both. So functionally, that's definitely part of it. We had furniture that we thought would be redeployable in the early days more often than it actually was, because it would come back to us and we would realize that the ability to refurbish it up to a rent ready standard just wasn't there as advertised. And so we really went ahead and did all of the testing ourselves. Our CEO and our VP of merchandising went and visited all of the factories and met the folks who we would be working with to make the product. They would pour wine on the sofa just to test and see right there how it really beat it up. And so
Yeah.
we were finding that a lot of the product just wasn't meeting our needs. Another piece of that is just relying on others within your supply chain. We have a pretty tight assortment, and there's a reason for that. I want to be able to redeploy the same gray sofa over and over, right? And make sure that that sofa really gets as many uses with as many customers over time as possible. In order to do that, I need to have a reliable supply of that gray sofa. Well, that gray sofa might not be as important to my distributor as it is to us. And so being able
Hmm.
to really source that product ourselves has given us a level of control over our supply chain that's really critical as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you seen similar things on the technology side in terms of some of the decisions you've made? Or, I mean, you talked about in a lot of cases it made sense to build it. But have you gone through maybe buy it first and use it for a while, and then when it outlived its life, you built it or gone on to something else?
Yeah, definitely. We had our very early, we're thinking about what is the right way to sort of track an asset through its entire life
Mm,
cycle.
okay.
Most products, so if you think about it coming from the factory, making its way, maybe from Asia to the US into a distribution center, a retail store, and then someone's home, and then probably a landfill, it's a straight line. For us, we needed to add in that loop at the end where it comes, back from Nick's
Right.
home, gets refurbished, and
Hmm.
goes back out to Susan's home. So we were able to use some off the shelf technology in the early days, but then found that actually tracking that individual asset on its final loop wasn't something that we were able to do with off the shelf software. So that
Yeah.
was a real signifier for us of, okay, this is something that we need to build. We also at different times have had off the shelf technology for our website. Ultimately, also because of the need to manage our inventory on a much lower level of granularity than what you can typically do with an off the shelf product, we've also had to build our own website from the ground up. And so those are decisions that we made over time just based on the unique needs of our business model.
Yeah. Yeah. Completely makes sense. What you talked about, I mean, I'm just thinking through all of the challenges that I'm sure that has to create for you guys, in terms of that inventory going out and being packed and then making it available on the website too, right? Like you don't want to be offering a couch that's not actually able to be to be sent out there. So all of these things have to work in harmony, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And as many businesses are these days, especially those that sell online, I'm sure you guys are amassing an amazing amount of data from how these products are being used, what customers are accepting them. How have you guys dealt with, the proliferation of data and churning through it to find things that are meaningful to your business?
That's a
Big
great
question, I know.
question. Yeah,
Yeah, big one.
in the early days, we weren't even sure what to track.
Mm,
And so we were gathering a lot of data, but it was coming through in ways that were just sort of, piling up in databases literally. And over time, our data team has really done an excellent job at identifying what are the things that we most need to track. And that's really coming from the, folks on the ground in every facet, whether it's tracking conversion rates on our website to damage rates on a given sofa. We're learning that
mhm.
as we grow, and then we're tracking all of that data, and we're now doing a much better job of analyzing it and driving business decisions around it. And so part of that has just been building out the internal data analytics function. And a big part of that has also been figuring out the ways to visualize that information and make it accessible to other people within the company. Because it's great when you have an analyst who can
Mm,
crunch all of the numbers.
right.
And we have some incredibly talented data analysts on the team, but it's also important to make that sort of self-service so that other people can make data-driven decisions about the product or about the offering. And so over time, getting more and more of our data onto just really easy to use dashboards. We use Looker for that. That's been just a
Okay.
huge, huge step forward for us in being able to make data-driven decisions at all levels of the organization.
Yeah, and not only having the visibility to it, but the consistency, right? Like having everybody within the organization accessible to the same information so that somebody's not over here with their little data warehouse, doing their own thing and a different department doing theirs as well, right? It's
Yeah,
important
you're
that we're all
exactly
looking at it
right.
consistently.
You're exactly right. And sometimes you might have the same data set, but two different people might query it in different ways or not understand
Mm-hmm.
enough of the data architecture to really understand
Yep.
the right way to frame the query necessarily. And so two very
Mm-hmm.
well-intentioned people who have the ability to query data might come back with two different solutions. And so, developing the right nomenclature, developing all of the right rules and parameters around how we store and identify pieces of data has also been a big part of the evolution of our business and our ability to make those data-driven decisions. We always wanted to, but only by tracking the right things in an organized way and making it accessible to the company, again, in an organized way, have we really
Mm-hmm.
made those huge steps forward on being able to actually use the data in the way that we want to.
I love asking that question because you get so many different answers and you find that different businesses are at different stages of their life cycle, right? To your point, some are at the beginning
Mm-hmm.
and there's data in databases and they don't really not sure what to do with it yet. Maybe they can query it and put it together in Excel or something like that. But what was the impetus for you guys to say that, hey, this is important enough that I need to hire data analysts and put people in charge of this information? Because it's so critical now, especially as you grow and scale up your business. But kind of what was that threshold for you guys that made sense?
Yeah, I think that we were fortunate enough to have a couple of people on the senior team. Even when I joined, there were just 10 people. And I want to say that our first data hire was probably employee number 15 or so. It was pretty early on
Okay.
in the days of Feather. And we knew intuitively that there was things to be gleaned from the data that we weren't getting. I certainly knew that myself just from my background in finance and analysis. But there were things that we felt we were sort of clumsily making decisions about. And I'll give you one example, which is only when we really started digging into the data did we start to see a trend on a specific product not being redeployed as often as we thought it was. And so we had this idea in our head of, of course, all of our products can be deployed many times. Well, we ran a quick query and saw, actually this specific SKU is going from deployed to broken more often than not. It's not going from deployed to in warehouse to deployed again. And
Uh-huh.
so even just that little insight really quickly zoomed us into something that obviously the folks in the warehouse were well aware of. They knew that this product was breaking all the time, but that
Uh-huh.
information was sort of stuck in a silo. And only when we started
Hmm.
having that data more accessible to all facets of the organization were we able to say, oh gosh, this is telling us something really interesting. And what else are we missing that isn't necessarily being recorded in a way or being digested by the person who can ultimately make a call of what to do with that product.
Right.
And so it's small things like that really just drive home the importance of looking at the data and seeing what it's telling you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure you would agree that, and a lot of times with subscription businesses, the margin for error is very low, right? You're out there with a whole lot of competition and you're trying to offer your products at, as competitive a price point as possible to get customers to convert. And so being able to highlight some of those opportunities and make yourself more profitable it's almost critical at this point. It's almost table stakes, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely true for subscription businesses. I think it's true for most businesses.
Yeah.
We're all trying to get it right more often
Hmm.
than not, and
Yeah.
and there are times when we're surely getting it wrong. But being able to identify when that happens quickly and then take action based on that information is just so important.
Yeah. Speaking of pricing there, how have you guys evolved that over time? Because again, you're talking about a fairly high ticket item that you're trying to get down to a price point that makes sense, month over month or over a year for a customer. So, how have you guys done that and put it in a way that, gets more customers to convert?
Yeah, that again is a good question. I think that the customer needs to feel that this makes economic sense for them,
Sure.
certainly.
Hmm.
And a big part of making the economic case really obvious is the fact that you pay monthly, right? And
Hmm.
you're paying monthly typically over a 12-month period, significantly less than you would pay to go out and buy that item retail. And so that's a big part of just sort of, oh gosh, I could go buy a sofa for $2,000 or I could pay $49 a month. Well, that's not a lot.
Yeah.
But we've played with pricing a bit over time. You know, the best pricing to the customer on a monthly basis is when they sign up for the 12-month plan. So they pay that $19 a month. As I mentioned earlier, that includes the free delivery and assembly, and then the lowest rates that we can offer on the monthly rate on the furniture itself.
Is it, do you find ways where you're trying to educate the customer on, hey, don't forget, if you go buy this, you've got to pay a delivery fee, or you've got to go rent or borrow a friend's truck to get this thing to your house, and then find a friend to help you carry it up the stairs, those kind of things that if you're talking about a white glove service, I mean, that goes a long way, right?
Yeah, definitely. That's what we call the hidden cost of ownership. And so there's
Okay.
definitely a lot of hidden costs that people don't think about on day one. You know, it's everything from paying the movers to move it between apartments when you're moving every 18 months. People aren't
Yeah.
necessarily thinking that far ahead. It's the cost of your time putting together furniture. It's the cost of your time, looking at 15 different websites and then scheduling 10 deliveries, each of which you have to take a half day off of work to receive versus just getting
Right.
everything from
So
us,
true.
within a couple
Yeah.
of weeks in one fell swoop, set up and delivered and assembled. And so, yeah, there's definitely opportunities for us to speak to the customer about all of these other different sort of frictional points that they don't even realize they're up against. And today the default behavior with furniture is to buy it. You think I'm
Yeah.
moving into a new place, I
Right.
need a sofa. Well, am I going to go to this store or that store?
Hmm.
And it's really just helping our customer understand that you don't need to buy it. In fact, there's a much better way for you to engage with furniture that just lines up a lot better with your lifestyle and your values. And that's renting.
Well, I can certainly speak to going from store to store to store, being that person who's looking at making a big decision. And, it's a commitment. This is something that you hope to have for 10 years or more, right? And are you going to love it as soon as you get it home? Is it going to look right in your house? And if it's not, then what do you do? And, you guys seem to be offering a pretty great alternative to that.
Yeah, you use what you need while you need it. And again, if you end up loving a piece, then anything that you've paid towards it goes towards ownership. And I think that
Hmm.
that's an important value prop for our customer. There's some things that it does make sense to own, but a lot of other things you don't need to own. I don't know about you, but I'm not terribly attached to my nightstands. They're fine. But there's other things, that are things that you really do want to have with you and keep with you. And for me personally, I've had just different periods of my life where I've really lived light. And,
Hmm.
one of them, I took a sabbatical. I traveled for nearly a year with just a backpack. And you realize how little stuff you need. And definitely not having to deal with those larger, big, and bulky items is a relief.
Yeah.
There are times when ownership makes sense. There are specific pieces of furniture for which ownership makes sense.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
in a lot
Yeah.
of cases, for a lot of people, it just doesn't. Renting can make just a lot more sense in terms of the convenience, freedom, and flexibility it provides.
Yeah. Absolutely. All right. Well, last question for today. Does anything come to mind as some sort of lesson learned that you look back on and wish you could go back in time and tell yourself, 2, 3, 4 years ago at Feather that, hey, go ahead and make this decision now or do this thing differently because it's going to play out a certain way. Tough
Hmm.
question, I know.
I wish that we would have moved to design our own furniture even sooner than we
Okay.
did, because we learned a painful lesson on the fact that so much of the furniture that's just off the shelf is not redeployable in the ways that we would have
Yeah.
hoped that it was. And
Sure.
so
Hmm.
that was a challenging lesson to learn for sure, but one that I think we learned quickly enough, and ultimately now that we're there is really setting us up for success longer term. um, hmm, I'm thinking what else. Interestingly enough, I think we've benefited a lot from going remote as a company. There's a lot of
Okay.
things that we're missing, but we've been able to tap into a labor pool that's a lot broader than what we had before.
Yeah.
I have colleagues now, as I mentioned to you earlier, I'm in Michigan at the moment. I have colleagues today that are sitting everywhere from Boston to Austin to Los Angeles and New York. And it's given us an incredible opportunity to really bring folks onto the team that weren't all based in New York City.
Hmm.
Um, and that we
Well,
can
that's an
do
interesting.
that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think about that too. Like, could we have gone remote or at least hybrid, sooner than we did? But do you think the labor pool in general was thinking that way in a way that we could have done it sooner if it weren't for the pandemic that accelerated all of this, 5, 10 years down the road?
Honestly, I don't know. I think that there's been a real shift in mindset, and I'm one of those people that really thought that we were better off being mostly in offices most of the time. And I still think that most people will be in offices a good chunk of the time. A big part of the office business that I mentioned to you earlier is really taking advantage of the fact that many people do want to go back to an office, but they're going back to
Hmm.
an office in a different capacity than they used to.
Right.
Maybe it's 2 or
Yeah.
3 days a week. Maybe it's a more collaborative space that they need.
Yeah.
And I do think that there's value to people being in offices and just the trust and empathy building that happens when you're in person with people versus just on a computer screen all day. But there's a lot of great things that have come from being able to be remote and learning that we can do our jobs like this. I think it's
Yeah.
enabled many people, and myself included, to take advantage of things in our personal lives that would have been more challenging if we were stuck to the city where our professional lives had tethered us. And so
Yeah.
maybe
Who
it took
knows?
this experience to show us. I don't know. Maybe it's not
Yeah.
something we could have actually done earlier. I think it's a fair, fair challenge. But
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. Well, we'll never know the answer to that question, but it is an interesting one to think about. I mean, overnight, it feels like all of us got suddenly forced to use Zoom and all of those other collaboration tools because we had no other alternative. But it was almost the thing that people hated before we had to use it, right? Or at least some people were very hesitant about using it. And now we've kind of all proven to ourselves it actually can be done, right?
it can, and I enjoy seeing people in person also.
Yes,
But
me too.
it's nice to be able to have this sort of hybrid way of working.
Yeah. Well, at least I appreciate the time today, taking the opportunity to learn about Feather and your journey there. For those listening today who maybe have a question for you or want to learn more about Feather, where can they go?
Yeah, absolutely. So our website is www.livefeather.com. And if you want to reach out to me directly, it's Ilyse@livefeather.com. You can find me on LinkedIn as well.
Awesome. Well, thanks again. I appreciate the openness and sharing all of your experiences with the listeners today. And best of luck to you and the Feather team.
Thank you. I really appreciate you having me on the podcast, Nick.
Thanks.